Hi, my name is Jeff Kingori, a current student at UMass Lowell, undertaking a course called Introduction to Labor Studies with Professor Suzanne Wining and Professor Hashduk. Today, I'm here joined with a guest. This guest is a renowned director of the AFL-CIO, and his name is?
I'm John Drinkwater.
And today, I'll just be asking you a few questions here and there to see of his position and his investment into the community. So looking back in your early life, how do you know that what core values have been set by both your parents and or community that are still a part of you today?
Well, certainly from my parents, I learned a lot about hard work, and they worked hard to try to provide for my family, myself, and my sister. And I was also fortunate, and my family was fortunate, that their hard work was rewarded adequately because they happened to both be represented by unions with their work. My dad was a pipe fitter with Local 537 in Boston, and he'd be up on rooftops, working on HVAC systems in the winter and in the summer, and he had a union there that helped train him with the skills that he needed and negotiate contracts that made sure he had good wages, good health care benefits, the ability to retire. He's now retired. And my mom was a teacher in the Lawrence Public Schools, which gave me an even bigger appreciation, I think, for the job that educators do, the hard work that they put in, both in school and at home. And my mom was also a union member, a member of the Lawrence Teachers Union, and she was also rewarded for the hard work that she did with good wages and benefits and representation. That upbringing really showed to me that public investment, and especially in young kids, is important, and that unions can help hardworking people provide a good life. So after going to school at UMass Lowell, getting involved in unions in the labor movement seemed something really important to me.
That's very encouraging. So did your work with the unions, did that overall determine what major you'd pursue? And if so, what major did you choose?
So I was a political science major at UMass Lowell, and that was something that I had actually decided to do, felt strongly about coming out of high school. In high school, I was really passionate about public policy and the way that politics can help shape public policy. So political science seemed like a natural fit for me. I also minored in history and sociology, which kind of helped me get even more of a background in public policy. So it was always something that I've been very interested in and felt strongly about. And really, if I was able to make a career in helping to shape policy in a way that helps regular people, helps working people, and just generally improves people's lives, that was something that I felt would be really rewarding. And fortunately, my education in the public schools and at UMass Lowell, a university of public higher education, really gave me the opportunity to use those skills and that knowledge to go out and get a career that I'm passionate about and is very rewarding, and I feel like I'm really helping people provide for them and their families.
On that note, what core values do you feel that you should be evaluated even today, elaborated even more so that you may even teach your children?
Sure. Well, I think what I would like my children to see is that you should work hard, and that a lot of people go out and work hard, and people deserve to be adequately compensated for their hard work. Everybody should earn a living wage. All work has dignity, and I hope they grow up to be hardworking, and they will demand dignity for the work that they do, and that they'll demand dignity for the work that others do too. Dignity includes everything from a real wage that can help you provide to to not having to worry about health care. I think that health care is a right that people deserve, and that people deserve security in their retirement. Children should be able to see that their parents retire with dignity, and we all have to be working now for a future where that can happen. So that's really something that I grew up with, and I think so much of what we need really starts with the ability to have your work compensated, and that people see work as having dignity.
Oh, that's amazing. So what is your own term of the definition of union, the word union?
Well, I think really simply, union is workers coming together to speak with one voice. And you could kind of get into it and all the rules and laws around what a union is and how you form one. But I think if you really look at it, worker, as long as there have been workers, they've been organizing together to raise standards. Not just in this country, but across the world. When workers are trying to improve their standards, improve their own lives, they don't do it by everybody going in a different direction and trying to help their own selves out and do it individually. It's something that happens organically, is that they come together as one to all work together. And as that has happened, through this country, we've kind of established a set of rules and laws that give workers the right to do that, to formally come together and formally demand a seat at the table with their employer. Just the ability to go back and forth and negotiate over things like wages, benefit, terms of work. So we've kind of formalized that arrangement where workers will come together and work together for their own benefit. But I think it's been that's been going on for much longer than we've even had a word for union. It's just something that it's always happened, and I hope that workers will be coming together to fight for one another for as long as possible.
Oh, that is very well. Prior to becoming the director of the AFL-CIO, in your previous line of work, did you partake in a union? And if so, which union?
Well, interestingly, when I was a student at UMass Lowell, after graduating from in political science, I went on to graduate school in regional economic and social development. And as it happened, I got a graduate research assistantship. And at UMass Lowell, graduate employees are represented by a union. It happens to be the United Auto Workers, which in addition to working on automobile manufacturing, is an amalgamated union that represents workers in all sorts of sectors across the economy, from auto manufacturing. They represent lawyers and really run the gamut. In addition to that, they represent graduate employees. So I was fortunate that they negotiated a stipend rate for graduate employees, health care for graduate employees. So at the time, I was already interested in unions and actually had an idea that I wanted to pursue a career in the labor movement. It did happen that as I was doing that, I was represented by a union as well. It was UAW Local 1596. That kind of helped me gain an internship at the AFL-CIO. So long before I was in the position of legislative director, I was able to come on and work part-time as an intern and kind of learn the organization, learn a bit about politics and legislation, and that's how I ended up getting my foot in the door.
Well, that is very well. As the director of the AFL-CIO, which union are you a part of right now? So
the staff at the AFL-CIO was represented by a union called the Office and Professional Employees Union, OPEIU, and it's Local 6 here in Massachusetts. So they are a union that represents everyone from public employees here in Massachusetts, workers who work in the trial courts, to a number of different sectors and industries, and so they represent the staff that works in the office of the AFL-CIO.
So, in your profession, I see you continuously mention how to become a team player or team worker in your community. So, without that, would you have felt that your impact in in your profession would not have been made possible?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's really important to note that while a lot of people go out and work hard, and the hard work of an individual deserves to be recognized and rewarded, I don't think any of us would really be able to be where we are without the investment of the public. Public schools are probably the greatest example of that, where we've decided Massachusetts is really the first state in the nation to say that we're going to invest in a public school system so that every child has the opportunity to get an education. And I think we can sometimes take for granted the fact that the opportunities that we have in life are really the result of public investment. You can even take that right down to the roads and the bridges and the highways that we drive on and that allow commerce to take place. So I think, when I think of community, I really, think of the notion that we're all in this together. And there are certain things that we can agree on that we're going to do together, like transportation, education from kindergarten right up to higher education. And I really put a big value on the fact that the state of Massachusetts invests in universities and gave me the opportunity to go to UMass Lowell and get an affordable higher education. So I think community and doing not just at the workplace, but a community, a city, a town, a state, doing things together is really important as well.
Oh, that's good. Being a director encompasses a large duty in overseeing the abundant unions within the organization. How do you maintain that level of stability within your occupational level?
Yeah, so you mentioned a number of different unions, and the AFL-CIO is a federation of unions. We are an organization that tries to allow unions to speak with one voice through the AFL-CIO. But if you look at our organization, we actually represent well over 700 different local unions throughout the state. That makes up about more than 400,000 union members that really run the gamut in just about every single industry and sector, from public employees, DPW workers, police, firefighters, to nurses, to construction workers, and it's a lot of different interests, a lot of different issues on the job. When you compare public sector, private sector. So it can be a lot, but I think the one thing that really kind of grounds you in the area of commonality is that it's unions all have a common interest in trying to protect and preserve that right for workers to just sit across the table, bargain the terms of their work, and really what you realize is that from occupation to occupation, even though people go out and do drastically different things every day on their job, there is just a big area of commonality at the end of the day, and that everybody deserves a voice on the job, and we really fight to preserve a system that allows workers to have that voice if they organize and if they so choose to form a union.
That is good. So earlier we had spoken about your commute to Boston. So in regard to that, how do you manage yourself to make it to work every day, too little or no complications?
Well, I don't know if I've ever gotten to work without any complications. It's interesting, and I think traveling, commuting to work really gives you a good sense, of some of the issues we have and some of the investments we need to make in the state. I think some days you just see traffic getting from a community like Lowell to Boston, and you can see how that could really shape where someone decides to live and the type of job they choose to take, and whether it's even feasible to commute into a city like Boston, to work. And I think we need to make sure that we're investing in both surface transportation and public transit, mass transit, to make sure that people can get from one point to another in the state wherever they need to go. I think if someone lives north of the city, like here in Lowell, they're almost precluded from working a job south of the city of Boston because it's practically impossible to get there. So I think to make sure that everybody has economic opportunities, we need to make sure that they can actually get from point A to point B to be able to maximize those economic opportunities that they might have. So, trying to get up and have young kids and try to get them off to school and daycare and try to get to work on time, it really gives you a sense of what all working families are struggling with doing, and how we as a state and a society can be making investments to just make that a little easier on people and make sure they can see through those opportunities.
That is nice. So humble of you. Also, in regard to that, what is your daily function as the director?
So every day is a little bit different, and that's one thing I like about the job. Naturally, as a state legislative director for an organization here in Massachusetts, a lot of what I do is over at the State House in Boston. So every year we file bills that help to raise standards for working people, both those who are in unions, workers who aren't in unions, who may want a union but find it the law is stifling their ability to organize. So we file legislation and try to see that through. We go meet with legislators. There are 200 elected state legislators in Massachusetts, and part of the job of the AFL-CIO and my job as legislative director is to make sure that our state legislators understand what our agenda is at the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. So oftentimes I'll be there at the State House, either meeting with legislators or following the business of the day at the State House. A lot of it is paying attention and making sure that if the House or the Senate is in session, that we know exactly what's being taken up and following amendments that are filed and things like that, because it does require some level of focus and vigilance to make sure that the different advocacy groups and lobbies out there aren't putting forward legislation or amendments that would actually hurt working people and their ability to make a living.
Yeah. And this following question is in regard to members of society who are in a workplace that is under a union and yet they do not want to partake in that. How do you feel that you support their plea or their cause?
Well, unions are very democratic organizations, and essentially the only way to form a union is through a democratic process. A majority of workers has to demonstrate that they want a union on the job. They're not forced to demonstrate absolute unanimity, but like many other aspects of our society, there's a democratic process to make sure it's what the majority of workers want. And here in Massachusetts, under public collective bargaining law, as well as under federal law, if a majority of workers demonstrate that they want a union, all the workers who fall under that particular bargaining unit are covered by a union contract. So while they may not have chosen to vote for the union is there in the workplace negotiating for better wages, better benefits, retirement, and also rules that protect them on the job on all of the workers' behalf, not just the workers who voted for the union. So we believe that all workers who fall under a union contract should be helping to contribute to the costs that a union incurs by representing workers on the job, sending union staff or officials to go and represent and fight for workers and bargain contracts. So we think that's fair, and we see it as there may be different opinions out there, but unequivocally where a union is representing workers, they're operating in every single worker's best interest who falls under that contract.
Mentioning the numerous unions under the AFL-CIO, how do the unions establish the payment of dues for each selective bargaining or collective bargaining associated with the unions?
Sure. Well, it's actually the members. Again, unions are elected democratically, and they're also governed democratically. And union rules, bylaws, including the level of dues that are paid, are all decided by the members themselves. And those are governed by union bylaws and union meetings, and members get the chance to weigh in and speak on and vote on these topics. And so it's really, I think unions are some of the most democratic organizations that exist in America today, because it's really the unions that have control. They elect officers, they create the rules. So obviously, it takes money and dues to finance the actual operation of a union, so it can work in everybody's benefit, and that includes dues. And there was a Supreme Court ruling last year that established that in the public sector, unions, members who are covered by the union, who are covered by the union contract, formally, prior to the ruling, could be, if the employer agreed, could be charged a fair share fee to at least cover the cost of collective bargaining, if not every activity that a union partakes in. Now in the public sector, unions can no longer be compelled to pay a fair share fee. However, in the private sector, we here in Massachusetts, if a union and employer agree that a fair share fee can be charged to every member of the bargaining unit, whether they choose to become a full-fledged dues-paying member, that's a fair process, because otherwise, unions don't have the financial resources to effectively fight on behalf of everyone, and their ability to bargain and go out and represent workers is significantly weakened if the workers who are benefiting from that employer-employee arrangement aren't actually contributing anything to the costs of that representation. So we do believe that every worker who benefits from collective bargaining should at least be paying making some contribution to the cost of collective bargaining.
So, so how are the meetings established for the AFL-CIO? Is it that they have bi-weekly, weekly, and if so, how do they warrant such meetings?
Well, everything is established through the Constitution and bylaws of the AFL-CIO. Because we have so many members represented by so many different unions, our governing body is an executive council. It's made up of over 70 different representatives from unions across the state. And that's all established in our Constitution, and those union leaders going out and representing their respective members on the Executive Council of the AFL-CIO are the ones who really drive the decisions that are happening in the direction of our organization. So we feel that those 400,000 plus union members throughout the state are actually all very well represented by the members of our Executive Council.
Well, that is great to hear. So what outside of that, of the teamwork and the representation of the members of the AFL-CIO, what are some aspiring lessons you've learned via experience compared to education that you feel to share with the general public?
Well, I think one thing I've really just come to appreciate through working at the AFL-CIO is just the dedication and the passion of so many different union leaders throughout the state. There might be a certain notion of what a union leader is out there in the general public, and the way they've been portrayed in in the media and things like that. But what a lot of people don't realize is that so many union leaders do the job of a elected union officer in their spare time. They're working full time along with everybody else, and helping to negotiate and help run the union is something that they do in addition to all of that, and in addition to their family responsibilities. So it really is, like, no pun intended here, a labor of love and passion and commitment for a lot of these leaders, and it was one reason I wanted to get into the movement, and it's one thing that I've really gained even more of an appreciation for being involved in it all these years.
Well, thank you, Mr. Director, Legislative Director John Drinkwater.
Thanks,
it was
Jeff.
a pleasure having you here with us.
It was a pleasure
and
to be here.
thank you, public, for tuning in on us. See you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.